Minister, appreciate your time just as you're about to enter that Cabinet meeting this afternoon. Can you give us any hints as to what the plan entails? Are you expecting Cabinet will sign off on that plan to get to a net zero by 2050 firm target today?
Well, Ashley, I'm delighted to join you from Albury in rural and regional Australia. Obviously, I represent a big patch of Western New South Wales out here. And I've been talking overnight at another COP, which is about global biodiversity and a leading role that Australia has in bringing the countries around the globe together to sign up to 30% of land and sea being set aside for nature. So that's, if you like, a bit of a flip side to COP26, but it's no less important. And I know you want to ask me what's going to happen this afternoon. I obviously can't tell you.
I'm not surprised to hear that. I do want to talk about what you've been doing this week, but before we do get to that, on those big talks in Glasgow, the Prime Minister has to turn up, doesn't he? The opposition, you heard there, Anthony Albanese, saying it would be embarrassing if he's a no-show.
Well, Anthony Albanese can wander around in his high-vis vest, frowning determinedly and giving us all sorts of instructions. The only thing I really want to hear from him is what the Labor Party's policy is on climate change more broadly, on the COP that I've just talked about, and on so many other critical issues to our industries, to our rural sector. But all they seem to want to do is just wait and see where, which way the wind blows, and then pick a populist position from there. So I'm not really interested in Anthony Albanese's views, and whether the Prime Minister goes to Glasgow or not is entirely a matter for him.
Well, I mean, to be fair to Labor, they have firmly embraced that 2050 net zero emissions target. Your Nationals colleagues, on the other hand, obviously still have a way to go until they get there. They keep saying that they're worried the regions will suffer any target like that compared to inner city people. They're talking about the country-city divide on this issue. But you, as someone, as you just pointed out, from the regions, you seem to be downplaying that there's any huge difference between the approaches between regional voters and city voters.
Yes, Ash, I am a rural Liberal. There's probably about 30 rural Liberals in the Parliament, in the House and the Senate. And we don't all think the same thing. And I'm sure the National Party members don't all think the same thing either. But as I've said before, we're overstating this city-country divide. I mean, that was something from the sort of rhetoric and the diatribes of maybe 20 years ago, even earlier. I see us as one country. Whether we live out here, we have relatives in the city, we travel to the city, we take our holidays all over the continent, and we want Australia to do well. And, we are determined as a government to represent the national interest. And I think that's vital. Look, the net zero issue is about not so much whether we get there, but how we get there. And the determination to use technology, I think, is well received, certainly by my constituents, because a lot of the reduction needed to get to net zero will come from technologies that exist but are not yet commercial. But we know that we can get there because we know how quickly things have changed in the past when it comes to the adoption of technologies at scale. I think there's a really good story to tell. As Environment Minister, of course, I want to get to net zero as soon as possible.
You mentioned the UN talks biodiversity this week that you've been involved with. Australia, I understand, is signing on to what's being called the Kunming Declaration. The plan is to protect about a third of the world's land and sea by 2030. I see this week WWF Australia released this study to coincide with that, suggesting that more than 1,500 of Australia's unique ecosystems, land and sea-based, aren't represented in any of our protected areas here. Is that correct, that many of our nationally significant species and ecosystems have no protections because they are outside those designated protected areas?
Well, it's missing the point, really, because whether the species are in a protected area or elsewhere, they are nevertheless protected under the EPBC Act, which I administer. So it means if there's any development proposal which is assessed by my department, it has to consider the range of species, whether they be animals or plants, that are on a scale of either vulnerable to critically endangered. So it doesn't matter where they are, they come within our national environmental law. But the other point that our critics are missing on this is that we are leading the way when it comes to protected areas, Indigenous protected areas, over 78 million hectares of Australia, and we've added 7 new sites recently, managed with support of our traditional owners and in keeping with some of their traditional knowledge. We're about to lift our marine park area from 39% of Australia's waters to 45% as we consult on new marine protected areas in the Indian Ocean territories. And you might remember our $100 million ocean leadership package towards the end of, earlier this year, where we're restoring coastal ecosystems and working with the Pacific when it comes to blue carbon and when it comes to shellfish reefs. But all of this too links back to communities, and that's a really important point I want to make. This is about bringing our communities with us. It's about practical action, whether it be bushfire recovery, building back better for the future, taking advice from scientists when it comes to those threatened species listings, locking that in and helping our landscapes become more resilient.
Minister, just finally, as you go into all these talks, as Australia prepares for the Glasgow talks, do you worry about credibility issues when this month you approved a third new coal mine development, you signed off on that expansion of the Mangul mine near Muswellbrook? Do you worry it's a bad look in the lead up to this conference?
When development proposals such as coal mines come before me, I'm responsible for, as I said before, administering the Act, and that includes assessing a proposal. Could be a coal mine, it could be a renewable energy plant somewhere, but every proposal gets that same treatment under environmental law, and conditions may be imposed, offsets may be required, but that is my responsibility under the Act. And the particular issues around the court action I can't talk about. There's a judgment and we are appealing that. But I do want to reassure people that the environmental law that Australians have come to rely on takes into account all of our threatened plants and animals. And we're backing that in with over $200 million spent on protecting them through action on feral species, because as everyone knows, cats, foxes and invasive weeds are damaging our landscape incredibly right now. So we're taking action on many fronts, and we'll continue to do that.
Minister, I appreciate you joining us. Thanks for your time on Newsday.
Thank you.